We'll continue to look at journalism's journey by learning about the culture of news and rituals of reporting, then by examining the business side of newspapers, including the economic impact of the digital turn, taking stock of the challenges facing journalism today, and considering the troubled future of journalism. Earlier, we learned news was the process by which people gather information and create narrative reports. But some would argue news is whatever is newsworthy. What merits transformation into a news story? There are several criteria used to determine newsworthiness, but ultimately, stories get covered if journalists, or their editors, want to cover them. The first criteria of newsworthiness is timeliness. Did the story just happen? Or did it happen last week, month, or year? After enough time has passed, it becomes old news and no longer relevant. Next is proximity. Local news outlets cover local news. A story on a city council meeting in Tennessee won't hold much interest to the residents of North Carolina. That doesn't mean a story always has to be local, though. When a national or international story has a big enough impact to report on, it should be tied to local impact as much as possible. For instance, after the Paris terrorist attacks, a journalist could talk to some locals who used to live there. Conflict is another big criteria in whether something is newsworthy. Is the story about a power struggle, a political battle, sports rivalry? Dramatic confrontations make good news. Next is prominence. Does the story involve a well-known public figure or celebrity? News always seems more interesting when it happens to famous people. Reporters also look for stories with human interest, those where extraordinary things happen to ordinary people. Another criteria for newsworthiness is consequence. Does the story matter? How many people does the story impact, and how? Useful stories are popular, those that give practical advice on a specific topic. Finally, is the story novel in any way? Is it about something new, odd, or surprising? New York Sun editor Charles Dana was quoted as saying, "When a dog bites a man, that is not news. But when a man bites a dog, that is news." American journalism has 5 core values. The first is objectivity, presenting the facts of a situation through a neutral viewpoint and apparent lack of bias. Journalists shouldn't tell people what to think, only what to think about. Readers should not be able to tell a journalist's personal viewpoints from the stories they write. A way journalists accomplish this is by favoring quoted interview subjects over the reporter's analysis. Another value is having a newsroom that reflects the demographics of the community it covers. From 1977 to 1994, the number of reporters from marginalized racial identities in newspaper newsrooms nearly tripled, from 4% to 11%, and the numbers continue to slowly increase. As of 2017, non-white journalists made up 16.6% of newspapers and digital-only newsrooms, while 39% of employees were women. Those still don't match the racial and gender makeup of the country, but they are getting closer. Television newsrooms are doing a bit better than their print and online counterparts, with non-white journalists comprising 25% of the TV newsroom staff and 17% of news directors in 2018. Women made up 44% of the TV newsroom staff and 34% of news directors, a record high. Radio news is the medium most dominated by white males, with only 11% of radio newsroom staff non-white and about 34% women. The next core value in American journalism is to get a good story, to gather perspectives that may be difficult to get, and to uncover important information someone may be trying to hide from public view. Along with getting a good story, journalists want to get that story first. Only one news outlet can be the first to break a story, and reporters want it to be theirs. The desire to scoop the competition, though, can pressure reporters to publish poorly researched, sloppily reported, and generally subpar work, all in the name of being first. What is more important than getting the story first is getting the story right. Journalists can and do make mistakes, and every time a news outlet publishes or broadcasts inaccurate information, it erodes their credibility. Traditionally, serious journalists pride themselves on the results of careful news gathering, ideally using multiple sources to confirm controversial information and allegations made in news stories. While American journalists often strive to live their core values, the realities of reporting is that they can encounter conflicts and ethical dilemmas. To guide them, journalists often follow ethical guidelines set by professional journalism groups, most notably the Society for Professional Journalists, SPJ, the Radio Television Digital News Association, RTDNA, and the National Press Photographers Association, NPPA. While each code is a little different, we'll look at the SPJ's Code of Ethics. First, seek the truth and report it. Ethical journalism should be accurate and fair, using original sources whenever possible, and identifying sources clearly, providing context, and giving voice to the voiceless. Next, minimize harm. Ethical journalism treats sources, subjects, colleagues, and members of the public as human beings deserving of respect. Consider the consequences of each news report by balancing the public's need for information against potential harm or discomfort. Act independently. The highest and primary obligation of ethical journalism is to serve the public. Avoid real and perceived conflicts of interest. Refuse gifts and favors, and avoid public political activity that may compromise integrity and impartiality. Finally, be accountable and transparent. Ethical journalism means taking responsibility for one's work and explaining one's decisions to the public. Maintain integrity by acknowledging mistakes and correcting them promptly. Explain ethical choices and abide by the high standards expected of others. One of the biggest challenges facing journalism today is the rapidly shrinking staff sizes of reporters, editors, and photographers. Back in 2001, there were more than 5,600 reporters working at daily newspapers in the United States. By 2018, the number was cut by more than half, to less than 2,500. The number of TV news staffers outnumbered newspaper staff for the first time in 2017, with 27,100 working in TV news and 25,000 at newspapers. Despite these huge staffing cuts, people are reading news from newspapers more than at any other time in U.S. history. They are mostly reading them online, delivered for free from Google or social media, who in turn earn digital ad revenue from the newspaper's content. Shrinking staff sizes are directly linked to declining newspaper revenues. But how does a newspaper make money? Historically, the majority of newspaper revenue came from print advertising. The newspaper's editorial staff, that is, its reporters and photographers, create content in the form of news, features, opinion pieces, and sports stories. The content attracts an audience. The newspaper's advertising staff then sells the newspaper's audience to advertisers. The more people read a newspaper, the more the ad staff can charge for an ad in that newspaper. While some newspapers earn revenue by charging subscription fees, those prices are typically kept low to help increase the audience size or circulation of the newspaper. Daily newspapers devote 1/2 to 1/3 of their newspaper pages to advertising. What's left after all ads are placed on the newspaper layout is called a news hole. The advertising staff must keep in regular communication with the editorial staff so they know how many stories are needed to fill each issue of the newspaper. Newspaper advertising was a great revenue source until about 2000. In conjunction with the digital turn, readers were seeking out free versions of articles online rather than paying for a daily newspaper subscription. Classified advertising started to drop off as sellers sought out free ads on sites like Craigslist. Then came the Great Recession of 2007. National and local companies slashed their advertising budgets to save money, and it never really came back. Newspapers needed to find ways to generate digital revenue through online ads and sponsored social media posts, which are priced lower than traditional print ads. Others have instituted a paywall, where readers need a paid subscription to view most online articles. But paywalls are unpopular, with readers accustomed to getting content online for free. To combat this, the New York Times and other newspapers have a hybrid model where users get a certain number of free articles each month and then need a digital subscription. That hybrid model has worked out well for the New York Times, who by early 2019 reported more than 3.3 million digital-only subscriptions for its news products. As this graph indicates, everything was smooth sailing for newspaper ads until 2007. Ad revenues were cut in half from 2005 to 2010, with 2017 levels the lowest they have been since 1980. Looking at newspaper operations, a major expense comes from salaries and printing the physical paper. Since printing fewer papers means less money they can charge for advertising, budget cuts tend to happen on the staffing side. As reporting staffs have shrunk, the remaining staff are expected to do more. To cover gaps in reporting, most importantly national news, newspapers rely on wire services like the Associated Press to supplement local coverage. A newspaper in Wilmington, North Carolina, for example, can't afford to pay a full-time reporter to live in Washington, D.C. and cover national politics. So instead, they pay a wire service who has hundreds of staffers throughout the U.S. and the world. Feature syndicates are used for daily horoscopes, crossword puzzles, comic strips, and advice columns. Now that we understand the history of journalism, it's time to look at the changes, challenges, and threats it faces today, and the impact of social media, the development of citizen journalism, the creation of satirical news, the proliferation of fake news, and attacks on journalists across the nation and world. While what social media means to journalism is still being debated, the use of social media by journalists is common. There is no doubt social media allows for almost real-time updates. When a magnitude 5.1 earthquake struck near Sparta, North Carolina, early one Sunday in August 2020, people immediately went to social media to see what happened. Journalists and citizens alike can post tweets, photos, and videos of breaking news. This immediacy doesn't allow for thorough reporting, bringing back the question of whether it's better to be first or to be right. Social media images and information can also be manipulated and shared hundreds of thousands of times before they're determined to be fraudulent. Social media itself can make headlines and create a narrative. Like in July 2017, when President Donald Trump tweeted about a ban on transgender service members in the military, which was news to the military. Along with social media, another development of the digital turn is the rise of blogging, originally a kind of amateur online journal, and has developed into a major source of news. Many reporters now blog in addition to their regular newspaper, television, or radio work. Some larger media outlets even hire people to blog exclusively for their websites, like Raleigh's WRAL.com and its money-saving Smart Shopper blog. Growing alongside blogs are news aggregators like Google News and Apple News that gather news from multiple sites. Journalists tend to dislike news aggregators, arguing the aggregators benefit from advertising driven by viewer clicks, but pay little to nothing to those doing the actual reporting. Next up is citizen journalism, a grassroots movement where activist amateurs and concerned citizens who are not professional journalists use the internet to disseminate information. Social media and smartphones make it easier than ever for the average person to engage in citizen journalism. While sometimes a citizen's image and videos are shared first with traditional media outlets, other times the content is uploaded directly to social media. Some of the most noticeable citizen journalism documents interaction between police and the public, including the deaths of Black men and women from police brutality. Satiric journalism also has an impact on current journalism. This hybrid of satire and journalism mixes information with humor. Led by programs like The Daily Show, now hosted by Trevor Noah instead of Jon Stewart, satirical journalism shows are popular among 18 to 48-year-olds. While they may watch for the entertainment, they're still absorbing the news headlines and in-depth reporting. And that reporting is top-notch. With Samantha Bee of Full Frontal, that's her next to Jon Stewart on The Daily Show billboard, beating CNN and PBS to win the Outstanding Achievement in News and Information Award from the Television Critics Association in 2016. Bee's former Daily Show colleague John Oliver, that's the dapper British gent second from the right, has won 2 Peabody Awards for what the awards call, quote, fresh, feisty investigative reports that real news programs would do well to emulate, end quote. Satirical journalism programs like The Daily Show and Full Frontal are meant to deceive, but some so-called news programs and websites do intentionally mislead their audiences for political or financial gain. While fake news has been around probably as long as news itself, the term gained notoriety during the 2016 U.S. presidential election. Let's be clear what fake news actually is. Believe it or not, the best definition of fake news actually comes from Wikipedia. Fake news is a type of yellow journalism or propaganda that consists of deliberate misinformation or hoaxes spread via traditional print and broadcast news media or online social media. The information presented isn't always patently false, but instead may contain misinterpretations or extreme bias to misrepresent facts. Using the term fake news to refer to information someone doesn't like or agree with, rather than deliberate misinformation, undermines the public's already eroding trust in all news media. Journalism is central to democracy. Both citizens and the media must have access to information to make important decisions. But survival of a free press is never a certainty. One major concern is the decreasing number of media outlets and increasing concentration of ownership. Many cities, both small and large, have just one newspaper that caters to middle and upper class readers. As the number of companies that own daily newspapers decrease, so do the chances for diversity of opinions, ideas, and information. Citizens need to be mindful of news sources and consider any hidden motivations and interests. Another major concern is anti-journalism propaganda and threats of violence. Labeling journalism as the enemy of the people can lead to actual violence against journalists, such as the 2018 shooting at a newspaper in Annapolis, Maryland, that killed 5 people, and the murder of Washington Post writer Jamal Khashoggi at the Saudi Arabian consulate in Turkey.